My name is Mark, and I'm 55 years old. For 28 years, Jessica was my wife. 28 years of building a life, a home, and what I believed was an unbreakable bond. We met in our late 20s, both ambitious, both eager to carve out our place in the world. I was a software developer, analytical and methodical. She was in marketing, vibrant, charismatic, and a natural networker. Our early years were a whirlwind of shared dreams, late-night talks, and the heady excitement of building a future. We started from humble beginnings, pooling our resources, making sacrifices, and supporting each other through every career climb and personal challenge. I was always the more financially conservative one, meticulously tracking our investments, planning for retirement, and ensuring we had a solid safety net. Jessica, while earning a good salary, was more inclined to enjoy the present. She loved designer clothes, exotic vacations, and lavish dinners. I didn't mind. I enjoyed seeing her happy, and her vibrant energy often balanced my more reserved nature. We had a joint checking account for daily expenses, a joint savings account, and several investment portfolios, all under both our names. It was our money, always discussed as such, a collective pool built on my steady contributions and her occasional, larger bonuses. I had always been transparent with her about our financial standing, believing that honesty was the bedrock of our partnership. Over the last 5 years, however, a subtle shift began to occur. Jessica's career took off in a big way. She landed a high-profile position at a top marketing firm, which brought a significant increase in her income, and with it, a growing sense of independence and, subtly, a detachment from our shared life. Her business trips became more frequent, her hours longer, and her social circle expanded rapidly to include new, flashier colleagues and clients. I was proud of her success, genuinely. I understood the demands of her new role and tried to be supportive, managing the household, cooking, and ensuring she had a peaceful haven to return to. But the distance grew. Our conversations became superficial. Our evenings, once filled with shared stories and laughter, were now often silent, as she would be glued to her phone or too tired for connection. When I tried to talk about our future plans, our retirement dreams, she'd become vague, dismissive. "Mark, we have plenty of time. Don't be such a worrier." Her affection dwindled, replaced by a cool politeness. The warmth that once defined our relationship slowly faded, leaving behind a chill. I knew something was wrong. My gut screamed at me, but I'm not a confrontational man by nature. I tried to address it gently, subtly. "Is everything okay, Jess? You seem a little distant." She'd brush it off, attributing it to stress, to her demanding boss, to the pressures of success. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe her. I tried harder, bought her flowers, cooked her favorite meals, suggested weekend getaways. She accepted them, but the chasm between us only widened. Then came the subtle hints about separate finances. "Mark, don't you think it's a bit old-fashioned to have everything joint? My colleagues all have separate accounts for financial independence." I balked at the idea. "Why, Jess? We've always been a team. What's the point of separating now? Are you planning something?" She'd laugh it off. "Don't be silly, darling. Just thinking ahead. Modern relationships are different." I resisted firmly. The thought of disentangling our finances after nearly 3 decades felt like a prelude to the end. The final, brutal blow came on a Tuesday evening after what I thought was a relatively normal dinner. We were sitting in the living room, me reading a book, her scrolling on her tablet. She looked up, her face devoid of emotion, her voice flat, almost rehearsed. "Mark," she said, her eyes fixed on the tablet screen, "I've decided. We're done. My lawyer will contact you next week to discuss the terms." My book fell from my hands. The words hung in the air, cold and sharp, striking me like ice shards. 28 years. Just like that. No argument, no discussion, no attempt at reconciliation. Just a cold, final pronouncement. My mind reeled. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to beg her to reconsider. But something in her eyes, a hardness I had never seen before, stopped me. It was over, and she had clearly planned this for a long time. A profound stillness settled over me, a chilling calm. My initial shock quickly gave way to a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. Not the explosive, emotional kind, but a deep, dangerous quiet. Understood. I responded, my voice surprisingly steady, almost emotionless. My heart, however, was hammering against my ribs, a drumbeat of betrayal and burgeoning rage. She glanced up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes at my calm response. She probably expected tears, pleading, an emotional outburst. But I gave her nothing. I just nodded, picked up my book, and walked out of the living room, heading towards my study. The moment I closed the study door, my mind, which had always been analytical, went into overdrive. My lawyer will contact you next week. That meant she had already consulted a lawyer. That meant she had a plan. And that plan, I knew instinctively, involved our shared finances. She, the ambitious marketing executive, would undoubtedly try to walk away with a significant portion of our assets, perhaps even claim more, leveraging my perceived emotional vulnerability. She had meticulously built her career. I had meticulously built our shared wealth. She wanted to cut me out financially, just as she had emotionally. A cold, hard resolve settled over me. If she wanted to play a strategic game, I was more than ready. I might not be a marketing executive, but I was a software developer. I understood systems, vulnerabilities, and precise execution. And I knew our financial accounts better than she did, intimately. I spent the rest of that night and the next 2 days in a silent, methodical frenzy. I worked from my home office, feigning illness to avoid work, my focus absolute. My first move was to access all our joint online banking portals. I knew every password, every login. She, confident in her pronouncement, likely hadn't even thought to change them yet. Why would she? She thought she had the upper hand, the element of surprise. I started with the liquid assets. Our joint checking account, our joint savings account, our money market funds. Every single penny. I transferred it all, swiftly and silently, to a new account I had opened years ago, a small, personal account I used for my own hobby projects, one she knew nothing about. The transfers were quick, instantaneous. Notifications to her email, which she would eventually see, but by then, it would be too late. Next, the investment portfolios. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, all under both our names, but largely managed by me. It took more time, more navigating through various brokerage platforms. I initiated trades, liquidating assets, then transferring the proceeds to my new secret account. This took a little longer, a few days for the transfers to clear, but it was set in motion. The house, our most significant asset, was jointly titled, and that would be a legal battle. But liquid cash, liquid investments, those could be moved with speed and precision. I even accessed our shared utility accounts, the credit card accounts linked to our joint bank. I set up automated payments to ensure that all upcoming bills were covered from a separate, smaller fund I kept, one that she couldn't touch. I didn't want to leave her completely destitute or affect our credit score negatively, at least not yet. This wasn't about petty spite. It was about protecting myself and ensuring she couldn't claim I was being irresponsible. It was about controlling the narrative, the assets, and her expectations. I didn't steal. I merely transferred. Everything was still technically ours at that moment, until a legal divorce decree declared otherwise. But I controlled where our money was held, and she no longer had access. I was simply protecting our assets from a hostile takeover. The emotional toll during those 3 days was immense. I was functioning on pure adrenaline and a simmering rage. My mind was a whirlwind of financial calculations, legal strategies, and horrifying memories of our life together, now tainted by the bitter taste of betrayal. I felt a deep, profound sadness for the end of my marriage, for the years I had invested, for the future that was now a shattered mosaic. But the sadness was intertwined with a cold, hard anger at her audacity, her presumption that she could just walk away, leaving me financially vulnerable. She thought she was strong. I would show her true strength. On the third day, after I had confirmed all transfers were complete, all funds secured in my new, untouchable accounts, I waited. I knew her lawyer would be making contact. I knew she'd soon realize the extent of my preemptive strike. I pictured her logging into our joint accounts, her confident smile fading as she saw the zeros, the frantic calls to the bank, the dawning horror as she realized what I had done. The image brought a grim, satisfying smirk to my face. And then the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I let go to voicemail. A few minutes later, the message came through. A crisp, professional female voice. "This is Rebecca Hayes, counsel for Jessica Peterson. I'm calling to discuss the dissolution of your marriage. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." Her tone was polite, formal, completely unaware of the financial earthquake that had just occurred. I smirked. Not my earliest convenience. At my convenience. I waited another hour, just to let the message sink in. Then, I called my own lawyer, Mr. Davies, a veteran in matrimonial law, known for his calm demeanor and ruthless effectiveness. "Mr. Davies," I began, my voice steady. "My wife informed me 3 days ago that she's ending the marriage. She said her lawyer would contact me. I've already taken some preemptive measures. I've transferred all our joint liquid assets to a new, secure account." There was a moment of silence on Mr. Davies' end, then a low chuckle. "Mark, you're a quick study. That was an aggressive move. Very aggressive, and very smart given the circumstances. I assume her lawyer will be in touch soon, realizing the current financial landscape." "Oh, I assure you, Mark, she will. Very, very soon." And he was right. Less than an hour later, my phone rang again. It was Rebecca Hayes, Jessica's lawyer. This time, her voice wasn't calm or formal. It was edged with a frantic urgency, a barely concealed panic. "Mr. Peterson," she began, her tone sharper, "I'm calling about the joint accounts. My client informs me that they are completely empty, and the investment portfolios have been liquidated. What exactly is going on?" "Ah, yes," I responded, my voice smooth, deliberately unhurried. Well, Ms. Hayes, when my wife informed me that we're done and that her lawyer would contact me, it seemed prudent to protect our shared assets from any potential unilateral actions. As you know, until a formal separation agreement is in place, those funds are technically still jointly owned. I merely ensured they were in a secure location, under my control, to prevent any unforeseen disbursements. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Mr. Peterson, this is highly unusual. This is financial duress. My client is distraught. She needs access to those funds." "Distraught, you say?" I mused, allowing a hint of cold amusement to creep into my voice. Funny, that wasn't the impression I got 3 days ago. Perhaps she should have considered the implications of such a swift, unilateral declaration of done without a proper financial strategy in place. After all, she's in marketing. I'm sure she understands strategy. "This is unacceptable. We will file an emergency motion. We will freeze your accounts." "You're welcome to try, Ms. Hayes," I said calmly. "But the funds are now in accounts unknown to your client. And as for an emergency motion for funds that are still legally joint until a divorce is finalized, and which I have simply transferred for safekeeping, I believe you'll find an uphill battle. Perhaps your client should have discussed her intentions with me before making such pronouncements." "Mr. Peterson, let's be reasonable." Her voice softened, a desperate edge replacing the fury. "This is not how we conduct divorces. We need to negotiate. My client is willing to renegotiate the terms she initially proposed. We can discuss a more equitable division of assets. A 50-50 split, perhaps, with spousal support tailored to her needs." I almost laughed. A 50-50 split, the term she initially proposed. The audacity of it. 3 days ago, she was ending the marriage with a cold dismissal, probably expecting me to roll over and hand her half of everything I had painstakingly built and managed. Now she was begging. "Ms. Hayes," I said, my voice firm, "there's nothing to renegotiate. My position is quite clear. My initial proposed terms for the divorce, which I will outline to Mr. Davies, will reflect her unilateral decision to end our marriage, her complete disregard for my emotional and financial well-being, and the extraordinary lengths I had to go to protect our shared assets from her impulsive actions. She chose to end this. She chose the method. Now she will face the consequences. But Mr. Peterson, my client has no access to funds. She can't even pay her bills. She has a significant mortgage on her separate investment property. She's distraught. The lawyer was practically pleading now. That sounds like a personal problem, Ms. Hayes, I responded, mirroring the coldness Jessica had shown me. Perhaps she should have thought about those things before she declared, "We're done." I certainly did, in the 3 days after her declaration. I let the silence hang for a moment, a heavy blanket of unspoken consequences. Have a good day, Ms. Hayes. Mr. Davies will be in touch with my formal proposal. I suggest you advise your client to be very, very flexible. And I hung up. The relief that washed over me was immense. It wasn't the joy of a battle won, but the deep, quiet satisfaction of having reclaimed my agency, my power, my dignity. Jessica, who had always thrived on control and emotional leverage, was now entirely outmaneuvered, financially crippled by her own impulsiveness and underestimation of me. The divorce proceedings that followed were brutal for her. My lawyer, armed with my meticulous financial tracking and the evidence of her lawyer's panicked calls, systematically dismantled her claims. Jessica tried to argue that I had stolen the money, but I had simply transferred it within jointly owned accounts before any legal order of separation. It was a gray area, but legally I was in the clear. She had no proof of malicious intent beyond my protecting what was ours. Her firm, hearing whispers of her financial troubles and her desperate calls for legal action, also began to distance themselves. Her reputation, once pristine, started to tarnish. She ended up with a fraction of what she had initially expected. She had to sell her separate investment property at a loss to cover her mounting legal fees and personal debts. She lost her prestigious job, unable to cope with the stress and the tarnished image. Her carefully constructed world, built on appearances and a facade of success, crumbled. I, on the other hand, slowly rebuilt. The financial impact was minimal for me. I had simply secured what was mine. The emotional scars, however, were deep. Trusting again, truly trusting, felt impossible. But I learned to be self-sufficient in a way I hadn't been since before the marriage. I invested in myself, picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends who had seen through Jessica's superficiality from the start. Sometimes, I hear through the grapevine that Jessica is struggling, that her life is a mess. I feel no joy, no schadenfreude, only a cold, detached sense of justice. She thought she could walk away, leaving me emotionally and financially devastated. But I showed her that underestimating the quiet, methodical man she married was the biggest mistake of her life. My wife said, "We're done. My lawyer will contact you." I responded, "Understood." Then I transferred everything to a new account. 3 days later, her lawyer begged to renegotiate. And in that moment, I realized that true power lies not in making grand pronouncements, but in quietly preparing for the inevitable and executing with chilling precision.